The break room smelled like burnt coffee and something else. Something chemical, like the residue of too many microwaved meals that had bubbled over and scorched the interior. Maya pressed her palm flat against the cold laminate countertop, feeling the slight give of old adhesive beneath the surface, the way it shifted like skin over bone. The fluorescent light above her head buzzed with that particular frequency that made her back teeth ache. Her fingers were trembling. She stared at them. These hands that felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. The scar on her right thumb from that mandolin incident 3 years ago, would be 3 years ago, was 3 years ago, was still pink and new. The cuticles were ragged because she'd always been a picker when she was anxious, and she'd been anxious for... How long had she been anxious? Maya? You good? The voice cut through the strange fog in her head. She turned to see Derek from accounting, his badge clipped crooked on his shirt pocket, holding a sad-looking burrito still wrapped in damp paper towels. He'd microwaved it too long. She knew this because she'd seen him do it. Because she'd been in this exact moment before. Because... Yeah, she said, and her voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Just tired. Tell me about it. Derek punched buttons on the microwave for another round. The plate inside rotated with a mechanical groan. Teresa's got me doing reconciliation for the last 6 months. 6 months! Like I don't have actual current work. Teresa? The name hit Maya like a slap. She gripped the counter harder, felt her knuckles go white. The room tilted slightly. And suddenly she wasn't just smelling burnt coffee. She was smelling the particular brand of vanilla air freshener Teresa kept in her office, the one that was supposed to smell like French vanilla cream, but actually smelled like artificial sweetener and lies. You okay? Derek asked again, and this time there was genuine concern in his voice. You look like you're gonna... I'm fine. Maya pushed off the counter, forced her legs to work. Her feet felt strange in her shoes. These worn Skechers she'd bought on sale at Marshall's, the ones that were already starting to separate at the sole. She'd worn these shoes for 8 months before replacing them with the more expensive pair she'd bought after her promotion. Her promotion, her breath caught. I need to. She didn't finish the sentence, just pushed past Derek and into the hallway. Oh, where the industrial carpet muffled her footsteps, and the walls were that particular shade of beige that existed only in office buildings and hospitals. The kind of beige that was designed to be inoffensive and ended up being suffocating instead. She walked past the cubicles in the main area, a maze of fabric-covered dividers in navy blue, each one topped with the same frosted glass accent panels that were supposed to look modern and just looked cheap. Janet was on the phone at her desk, twirling the cord around her finger the way she always did. Marcus was typing with 2 fingers, hunting and pecking, squinting at his screen. Everything was exactly as it had been. Exactly as it would be. Maya's stomach lurched. She made it to the bathroom and locked herself in the far stall, the one with the door that didn't quite close all the way. Where you had to hold it with your foot. She sat down on the closed toilet lid and put her head between her knees, breathing through her mouth because the bathroom smelled like industrial cleaner and that floral soap that came out pink and left your hands feeling filmy. This wasn't possible. People didn't just wake up and find themselves 5 years in the past. People didn't get second chances. Life didn't have a rewind button, didn't let you take back mistakes, didn't give you the opportunity to... Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The screen was cracked. She'd dropped it 2 weeks ago, would drop it, had dropped it, on the sidewalk outside her apartment. The wallpaper was a generic photo of a sunset she'd never taken. No Face ID on this model. She had to type in her passcode, 0824, her birthday. The notification was from Teresa. Can you come see me when you have a moment? Maya stared at the words until they stopped making sense, until they were just shapes on a screen. She knew what this meeting was about. She knew because she'd lived through it once already, because somewhere in her mind was the memory of walking into Teresa's office with its vanilla air freshener and its motivational posters about teamwork and excellence, of sitting in the chair across from Teresa's desk while her boss explained that they needed to be flexible and team players and think outside the box. The box in question being payroll fraud, not that Teresa had called it that. Teresa had made it sound like a favor, like a special project, like an opportunity to prove herself as a valuable member of the Ridgemont Consulting family. Teresa had smiled her bleached teeth smile and said things like, just between us and temporary solution, and I'm trusting you with this because I know you're discreet. Maya had been 26 years old and desperate to keep her job. The economy was bad, was going to be bad, was still bad, and she'd already been living paycheck to paycheck. And Teresa was the vice president of operations, and who was Maya to question someone in senior management? So she'd said yes. She'd clocked Teresa's hours under her own employee ID for 6 months. She'd watched her paychecks stay the same while knowing that somewhere in the system, it looked like she was working 70, 80, 90 hours a week. She'd watched Teresa take vacations and long lunches and half days while marking herself as present, marking herself as working. Accumulating time she'd later claim as overtime. And when it all came crashing down, when the audit revealed the discrepancies, when the lawyers got involved and the police were called and the TV crews showed up in the parking lot, it was Maya's employee ID on the time cards, Maya's name on the records, Maya who got charged with payroll fraud while Teresa claimed ignorance, claimed she'd trusted Maya with administrative access and had no idea it was being abused, Maya who'd spent 18 months fighting charges, Maya who'd lost everything, Maya who'd stood in a courtroom and heard the word guilty echo off the walls, and then what? She couldn't remember. The memory was there, but not there, like trying to hold water in cupped hands. She remembered the courtroom, the fluorescent lights, the judge's face sagging with disappointment, or maybe just exhaustion. She remembered the sound of the gavel. She remembered walking out into a world that suddenly had no use for a convicted felon, a world where every job application had that checkbox. Have you ever been convicted of a crime? And then nothing. Or not nothing. A void. A gap. And then waking up this morning in her old apartment, the studio with the leaky faucet and the neighbor who played bass guitar at 2 a.m, waking up to an alarm she didn't remember setting, in sheets she'd donated to Goodwill years ago, in a body that felt younger and older at the same time. Her phone buzzed again. Teresa? Maya? The bathroom door opened, heels clicked on tile, the sharp, precise sound of expensive shoes. Maya held her breath. Watching through the crack in the stall door as someone moved to the sink, the water ran. Paper towels pulled from the dispenser with that industrial thwack-thwack sound. "I know you're in there," Janet's voice said. Maya's chest tightened. Janet? God, Janet with her purple reading glasses on a beaded chain and her collection of inspirational desk calendars? Janet, who'd testified at the trial, who'd said under oath that she'd never seen Teresa ask Maya to do anything inappropriate, who'd claimed that Maya must have been acting alone. "I'm fine," Maya said through the stall door. "You don't sound fine." Janet's heels clicked closer. "Derek said you looked like you were going to pass out. Just felt a little dizzy. You need to eat more. You're too thin." Maya wasn't thin. She'd never been thin. But Janet said things like this. We lobbed these little observations disguised as concern, and you were supposed to just accept them because she was older and had worked at Ridgemont for 15 years, and therefore had the authority to comment on your body. "I'll grab something from the vending machine," Maya said. "Teresa's looking for you." Of course she is. "I know. I'll go see her in a minute." Janet didn't leave. Maya could see her shadow under the stall door, could hear her breathing, that slightly wheezy sound from decades of smoking that she'd quit, but her lungs hadn't forgotten. "You know," Janet said slowly, "Teresa really values you. She told me yesterday that you're one of her most reliable people." The words made Maya's skin crawl. She pressed her palms against her thighs, feeling the cheap polyester of her work pants, the way the fabric had started to pill at the knees. "That's nice to hear," she managed. "It's important to have that kind of trust from upper management," Janet continued, "especially in this economy. Companies are always looking to trim the fat. You know, you want to make yourself indispensable." Indispensable. Maya had made herself indispensable, hadn't she? She'd been so eager to please, so desperate to prove her worth, that she'd committed fraud. And where had it gotten her? "I'll keep that in mind," Maya said. Janet's shadow finally moved away. "Don't keep her waiting too long. You know how she gets." The bathroom door swung shut. Maya counted to 30, then stood up on shaking legs. She flushed the toilet even though she hadn't used it. That social performance, that need to justify her presence in the bathroom. Then she went to the sink and stared at her reflection in the cloudy mirror. She looked young. God, she looked so young. 26, fresh-faced, despite the anxiety that had already carved tiny lines between her eyebrows. Her hair was longer than she'd worn it in years, pulled back in a ponytail that did her no favors. No gray yet. That would come later, stress gray at 29, sprouting at her temples like frost. Her hands gripped the edges of the sink. The porcelain was cold and slightly damp. If this was real, and some part of her was starting to believe it was real, no matter how impossible, then she was standing at a crossroads. She could walk into Teresa's office right now and say no. She could refuse to be complicit. She could protect herself, but would anyone believe her if she tried to warn them? Would anyone listen if she went to HR right now and said, "Teresa is going to ask me to commit fraud"? She had no proof, no evidence, just a memory of things that hadn't happened yet, things that would never happen if she made different choices. Her reflection stared back at her, and for a moment Maya felt the weight of all those lost years pressing down on her shoulders. The trial, the conviction, the job rejections, the apartment she'd lost, the friends who'd stopped returning her calls, the slow, grinding poverty of being marked as a criminal. She'd lost so much, she wouldn't lose it again. Teresa's office was at the end of the hall, around a corner where the carpet changed from industrial gray to a slightly nicer industrial blue. The door was solid wood, or wood veneer made to look solid, with a nameplate that read Teresa Chen, DVP Operations in serif font. Through the frosted glass panel beside it, Maya could see movement, a shadow pacing. She knocked. Her knuckles against the door made a sound that seemed too loud, too final. "Come in!" Maya turned the handle. The door swung open on hinges that needed oil, making that slight squeaking sound she'd forgotten about. And there it was, the vanilla air freshener, cloying and artificial, mixing with the smell of Teresa's coffee. Not the burnt break room sludge, but the expensive kind, the flavored pods Teresa kept in a drawer and made in the Keurig she'd bought for her office. The office was exactly as Maya remembered. The motivational posters, a mountain climber with excellence in white letters, a row of ants carrying a leaf with teamwork, hung at perfect angles on the wall. The bookshelf displayed business books Teresa had never read, their spines uncracked. Good to great, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, lean in. The desk was glass and chrome, minimalist, with just a laptop, a phone, and a framed photo of Teresa with her husband and 2 golden retrievers. Teresa herself stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot 4 stories below. She was wearing a cream blazer over a silk shell, black pants, and those heels, the Louboutins with the red soles that cost more than Maya's monthly rent. Her hair was cut in a sharp bob, dark and glossy. She was 42 but looked younger, thanks to the Botox she pretended she didn't get, and the personal trainer she mentioned constantly. "Maya, thanks for coming," Teresa said without turning around. "Close the door." "Nah, would you?" Maya's hand found the door handle. She pulled it closed, heard the latch click. The sound seemed to seal something, to mark a point of no return. "Have a seat." Teresa gestured to one of the chairs across from her desk. Maya sat. The chair was modern, all angles and minimal padding, designed to look good rather than be comfortable. Her feet didn't quite touch the floor properly. She felt like a child called to the principal's office. Teresa finally turned from the window. Her smile was practiced, the kind that showed teeth but didn't quite reach her eyes. "How are you settling in? You've been with us for what? 3 months now?" 4, Maya said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. 4 months yesterday. Right. Teresa moved to her desk, settling into her chair with the kind of casual grace that came from never having to think about whether you belonged somewhere. "And you're happy here? You feel like you're finding your place in the team?" This was how it had started before. This performance of concern, this establishing of rapport. Teresa was good at this, at making you feel seen, valued, special. It was how she'd climbed to VP by 40. It was how she'd convinced Maya that committing fraud was somehow an act of loyalty. "I'm learning a lot," Maya said carefully. "That's wonderful. You know, I had a feeling about you when we hired you. I told HR, this one's going to go far. You've got that quality, that willingness to do what needs to be done." Maya's stomach twisted. She folded her hands in her lap, felt her short nails dig into her palms. "I appreciate that." "The thing is," Teresa said, leaning forward slightly, her elbows on the desk, "we're in a bit of a situation. Budget situation. Upper management is breathing down my neck about operational costs, and you know how it is. The pressure always flows downward." Here it came. "I understand," Maya said, though she understood nothing yet. Wasn't supposed to understand anything yet. "We need to get creative. Flexible." Teresa picked up a pen, rolled it between her fingers. It was expensive, brushed metal, the kind of pen that made a statement. I've been working crazy hours. You've seen it, I'm sure. Early mornings, late nights, weekends. But the way our payroll system is set up, there are these constraints on how executive time is tracked. Maya said nothing. Her heart was beating too fast. The optics matter, you know? If it looks like the VP of Operations is claiming a ton of overtime, it raises questions. Questions about whether the role is properly scoped, whether we need to restructure, and restructuring means layoffs. Means people like you, talented people just starting their careers, getting cut because of budget issues that have nothing to do with performance. The lie was so smooth, so practiced. Teresa had probably been using some version of this speech for years, on different assistants in different companies, leaving a trail of fall guys in her wake. "What do you need from me?" Maya asked. Teresa's smile widened slightly. "I knew I could count on you. Look, it's simple. I need someone to help me with time tracking. Someone I can trust to be discreet. You'd clock in my hours under your employee ID, just temporarily. Well, just until we get through this budget review cycle. And of course, I'd make it worth your while. We're talking about a promotion in your future, Maya. A real step up." "A promotion?" Maya kept her voice flat, neutral. "Absolutely. In 6 months, maybe sooner if you play your cards right, I can already see you in a supervisory role. Junior manager, maybe. Better title, better pay. But I need to know you're a team player first, that you understand how business really works." Maya looked at Teresa's face, the smooth forehead courtesy of Botox, the sharp contours courtesy of genetics and expensive skincare, the eyes that assessed and calculated and revealed nothing. In her first life, she'd thought Teresa was sophisticated, impressive, someone to emulate. Now she just saw a predator. Someone who'd perfected the art of devouring people without leaving visible marks. "Can I think about it?" Maya asked. The smile flickered. Just for a second, just a micro-expression, but Maya saw it. Teresa hadn't expected resistance, hadn't planned for anything but immediate compliance. "Well, I mean, of course," Teresa said, recovering, "though I'd need to know pretty quickly. Like I said, this is time sensitive. The budget review is in 2 weeks." "I understand. Can I have until tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." Teresa set down her pen, aligned it precisely parallel to the edge of her desk. "Sure, tomorrow. But Maya, I want to be clear. This conversation stays between us. You understand that, right? This is sensitive. If word got out that we were even discussing flexible time-tracking solutions, Wuggy, people might get the wrong idea. Flexible time-tracking solutions. That's what she was calling it now. "I won't say anything," Maya said. "Good." Teresa stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I know I can trust you. You're smart. You know which way the wind blows." Maya stood too, her legs unsteady beneath her. She moved toward the door, her hand on the handle, when Teresa spoke again. "Oh, and Maya, I'd really encourage you to think carefully about what this opportunity could mean for your career. Jobs like ours don't come around every day, especially not these days." The threat was implicit but clear. Say yes, or there won't be a job at all. Maya nodded, pulled open the door, and stepped back into the hallway. The vanilla smell clung to her as she walked away, synthetic and suffocating. Maya didn't go back to her cubicle. Instead, she found herself in the stairwell, that forgotten space between floors where people only went during fire drills. The concrete walls amplified every sound. Her breathing, the rustle of her clothes, the distant hum of the HVAC system. She sat down on a step, her back against the cold wall, and let herself shake. She'd said no, not explicitly, not yet, but she'd created space for no. She'd asked for time when Teresa had expected immediate compliance. It was a small rebellion, barely visible, but it felt enormous. In her first life, she'd walked out of that office and immediately started the fraud. She'd been too scared to question, too intimidated to refuse, too desperate to risk her job. She'd told herself it was temporary, that it would be fine, that Teresa knew what she was doing, and look where that had gotten her. The stairwell door above her opened. Footsteps descended. Quick, light steps. Maya looked up to see Priya from IT carrying a toolbox and looking at her phone. "Oh," Priya said, stopping when she noticed Maya. "Didn't expect anyone to be in here." "Taking a break," Maya said. Priya nodded, her dark hair swinging in its braid. She was young, maybe 24, with the kind of easy competence that came from actually knowing what you were doing. Maya didn't know her well, hadn't known her well in the first timeline either. It was its own world, its own social ecosystem, barely intersecting with operations. "Rough day?" Priya asked, sitting down on the step across from Maya, setting her toolbox beside her. "Something like that." "Tell me about it. I've been trying to unfuck the payroll system for 3 days now. Worse, some genius in finance decided to do an update without checking compatibility, and now half the time tracking reports are corrupted." Maya's head snapped up. "The payroll system is corrupted?" "Not corrupted, exactly, just glitchy. Some of the data's not syncing properly between the time clock and the main database. We've got employees showing up with weird hours, duplicated entries, that kind of thing." Priya shrugged. "Should be fixed by end of week, hopefully." "Which employees?" "Random. No pattern I can see. Why, are your hours messed up?" "No, Maya's mind raced. The glitchy system, the corrupted data, the perfect cover for what Teresa was planning. "I was curious." Priya gave her a look that suggested she didn't quite buy it, but wasn't interested enough to push. "Well, if you notice anything weird with your time cards, let it know. We're trying to catch all the errors before the next payroll run." "I will, thanks." Priya stood, picked up her toolbox. "You good? You look kind of pale." "Just need to eat something." "Vending machine on 3 has those cheese crackers that are almost not terrible." Priya started down the stairs, then paused. "Hey, between you and me, if something's going on, if someone's making your life hard, document everything. Screenshots, emails, all of it. Trust no one, cover your ass. Words to live by in corporate America." She disappeared down the stairs before Maya could respond. The door swung shut behind her, leaving Maya alone with the echo of that advice. Document everything. Maya pulled out her phone. The screen was still cracked. A spider web spreading from the bottom right corner. She opened her email, her work email, and scrolled through the messages. There, from 3 days ago, from Teresa. "Can we schedule some time to talk about a special project? Would love to get your thoughts on some workflow optimization." Workflow optimization. It was already starting. The careful language, the paper trail that Teresa would later use to claim she'd been discussing legitimate business strategy. Maya took a screenshot, then she opened a new note on her phone and started typing. April 12th. "Teresa asked me to come to her office, said she needed help with time tracking. Asked me to clock her hours under my employee ID, called it a flexible time tracking solution. Promised promotion in 6 months. Said to keep it between us. Implied my job security depends on compliance." Her fingers trembled as she typed. It felt surreal, documenting a crime that hadn't happened yet, that wouldn't happen if she refused to participate. But if Teresa tried to retaliate for her refusal, if things went the way they had before, she needed insurance. The stairwell door opened again. This time, it was Marcus from her team, balancing a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. "There you are," he said. "Janet said you weren't feeling well." Marcus. God. Marcus, who would be laid off in 8 months, who would end up working at a Target, who would testify at her trial that he'd seen her working late all the time and assumed she was just dedicated. Marcus, who meant well but never looked deeper than the surface. "I'm okay," Maya said, standing up. "Just needed some air." "In the stairwell?" "It's quiet." Marcus laughed. He had a kind face, round and open, the kind of face that believed what people told him. "Fair enough. Listen, if you're coming back to your desk, can you help me with that Henderson report? I'm completely lost on the formatting." "Sure." Maya slipped her phone back into her pocket. "Let me just stop by the bathroom first." "Cool. Oh, and bring those cheese crackers from the vending machine. Priya's right. They're not terrible." He disappeared through the stairwell door, leaving it open behind him. Maya could hear the normal sounds of the office filtering in. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, the low murmur of conversations. Life going on, oblivious to the small disaster being averted in real time. She climbed the stairs slowly, her hand on the rail. The metal was smooth and cold under her palm. With each step, she felt herself solidifying, becoming more real in this timeline. The fog that had surrounded her since waking up this morning was starting to clear, leaving behind a sharp, painful clarity. She was here. This was real. And she had a choice. Maya's cubicle was exactly where she'd left it. A 5x5 square of semi-privacy, the fabric walls a depressing navy blue, her desk cluttered with the detritus of office life, a coffee mug that said Mondays, with a picture of a grumpy cat, A desk calendar from an insurance company, a framed photo of her college graduation, her parents' faces proud and hopeful, unaware of what was coming, what had been coming, what wouldn't come now. She sat down in her chair, the one with the broken lumbar support that made her back ache by 3 o'clock, and woke up her computer. The screen blinked to life, showing her generic desktop background of a mountain range. No personal photos here. She'd learned early that personalizing your workspace only made it harder to leave, made you feel like you belonged when you never really did. Marcus was 2 cubicles over, already talking to someone on the phone, his voice rising and falling in that customer service cadence. Janet was at her desk, typing slowly with 2 fingers, squinting at her screen. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it should be. Except Maya, who had lived through this day before, who knew what was coming, who was trying to figure out how to change the ending. She opened her desk drawer slowly, quietly, looking for something she knew was there. Buried under loose pens and old receipts, and a pack of gum she'd bought 2 weeks ago, she found it. A small flash drive, the generic blue plastic, the kind they handed out at conferences. She'd never used it in her first timeline. It had just sat in her drawer, forgotten. Not this time. Maya plugged it into her computer and started copying files. Her employment contract, her job description, every email Teresa had sent her, her time cards from the past 4 months showing her actual hours worked. She worked quickly, glancing up every few seconds to make sure no one was watching. Document everything. The files copied with agonizing slowness, a progress bar inching across the screen. Maya drummed her fingers on the desk, a nervous rhythm that matched her heartbeat. From somewhere in the office, a phone rang unanswered. Someone laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Her computer chimed softly, files copied. She ejected the flash drive and slipped it into her pocket, feeling the weight of it like a talisman. Maya? She jumped, nearly knocked over her coffee mug. Janet was standing at the edge of her cubicle, holding a folder. Sorry, didn't mean to startle you. Janet's smile was apologetic. Do you have a second? I need you to review these expense reports before I submit them. Maya took the folder, flipped it open. Standard stuff. Mileage reimbursements, hotel costs from a conference, meal receipts. Everything looked legitimate, properly documented. Exactly the kind of boring administrative work that kept a business running. Looks fine, Maya said, handing it back. Thanks. Janet didn't leave. She shifted her weight, the folder pressed against her chest. I wanted to say, I know Teresa can be intense sometimes. Demanding. She has high standards, and that's good. Oh, but it can be a lot for people who are still learning the ropes. Maya's guard went up. Okay? If she's asking you to do anything you're not comfortable with, anything that seems outside your job description, you can always come to me. I've been here a long time. I know how things work. It was a strange offer, coming from the woman who would later claim to know nothing about Teresa's fraud. But looking at Janet now, at the concern in her eyes that seemed genuine even if it wasn't, Maya wondered if this was Janet's way of offering an out, a warning wrapped in corporate speak. I appreciate that, Maya said carefully. I'll keep it in mind. Janet nodded, satisfied. She started to turn away, then paused. You know, when I started here, I was just like you, eager to please, willing to do whatever it took to succeed. But I learned something important. You can't trust everyone who smiles at you. Sometimes the people who seem the most successful got there by stepping on the people below them. Is that what you think Teresa does? The question came out before Maya could stop it. Janet's expression shuddered immediately, going carefully neutral. I think, Janet said slowly, that Teresa is very good at her job. And I think you should be very careful about what favors you agree to do. Then she was gone, disappearing around the corner with her folder, leaving Maya sitting there with more questions than answers. Was Janet warning her? Or was this some kind of test, a way to see if Maya would report back to Teresa about doubts or disloyalty? In the corporate world, it was impossible to tell who was genuinely trying to help and who was just protecting their own interests. Maya pulled out her phone and added to her notes. Janet from accounting warned me to be careful about favors and not to trust people who smile. Unclear if she knows about Teresa's fraud or is just generally cautious. Seemed genuine but could be covering herself. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Hope work is going well. Call me this weekend? Maya stared at the message, her throat tight. Her mother. God. In the first timeline, her parents had been devastated by the trial, by the conviction. Her dad had tried to be supportive, but she'd seen the disappointment in his eyes, the way he couldn't quite look at her the same way. Her mom had cried a lot and kept saying things like, "How did this happen?" And "You're a good girl. You wouldn't do this," even though the evidence said otherwise. They'd believed in her innocence, but the world hadn't. And eventually, even their belief had become exhausted, worn down by lawyers' fees and court dates and the relentless grind of a daughter who'd become a source of shame instead of pride. She typed back, "Work is fine. We'll call Saturday. Love you." Then she closed out of her personal messages and opened her work email again. She needed to respond to Teresa, needed to buy herself more time while she figured out what to do next. "Teresa," she typed, "thank you for the opportunity to discuss the special project. I take the responsibility seriously and want to make sure I understand all the implications before moving forward. Could we schedule a follow-up meeting tomorrow to discuss the details in more depth?" She read it over 3 times, looking for any hint of resistance or suspicion. It was perfectly neutral, perfectly professional, the kind of response that said, "I'm taking this seriously," without saying yes or no. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The response came back in less than 2 minutes. "Of course, let's meet tomorrow at 2. My office." Maya's stomach dropped. Tomorrow? She had less than 24 hours to figure out how to handle this, how to protect herself, how to navigate a situation where every choice felt like stepping off a cliff. She looked around the office, at the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, at the generic motivational posters on the walls, at the people around her going about their days oblivious to the fraud being plotted, to the lives that would be ruined if nothing changed. And she made a decision. The law office of Patricia Martinez occupied the 3rd floor of a converted brownstone in the city's historic district, the kind of neighborhood where the coffee shops had exposed brick and the boutiques sold $70 candles. Maya had found it through a Google search on her lunch break. "Employment lawyer near me." The reviews were good. Patricia Martinez specialized in employment disputes, wrongful termination, workplace harassment. One review said, "She actually listened to me and didn't make me feel stupid for not knowing my rights." That had decided it. The waiting room was small but comfortable. Soft chairs in muted colors, a coffee table with legal magazines arranged in a fan, a receptionist behind a frosted glass divider. It smelled like fresh paint and anxiety. While Maya sat with her hands folded in her lap, trying not to look as terrified as she felt. "Miss Martinez will see you now," the receptionist said. Patricia Martinez's office was professional without being cold. Law books lined one wall, but they looked actually used, broken spines and sticky notes protruding. Her desk was organized chaos, case files stacked neatly, a laptop open, family photos in simple frames. Patricia herself was in her 50s, gray hair cut short, wearing a simple navy suit and no-nonsense expression. "Maya Chen?" She stood, offered her hand. Her grip was firm. "Have a seat. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Water would be great." Patricia poured from a pitcher on her desk, handed Maya a glass. The water was cold, lemon slices floating in it. Maya sipped it gratefully, trying to calm the churning in her stomach. "So," Patricia said, settling into her chair. "You mentioned on the phone that you're concerned about a potential workplace issue. Why don't you tell me what's going on?" Maya set down the water glass, watching condensation bead on the outside. "My boss asked me to commit payroll fraud." Patricia's expression didn't change. She picked up a legal pad and pen. "Okay, walk me through it. From the beginning." So Maya did. She explained Teresa's request, the supposed budget pressures, the promise of promotion, the insistence on secrecy. She pulled out her phone and showed Patricia the notes she'd been taking, the screenshot of Teresa's initial email. "You haven't done anything yet?" Patricia asked. "No, she asked me yesterday. I said I needed time to think about it. We have a meeting tomorrow?" "Good." Patricia made notes in precise handwriting. "That's good. You have documentation, you haven't participated, and you came here before taking any action. That puts you in a strong position." "What should I do?" Patricia set down her pen and looked at Maya directly. "First, you need to understand what you're dealing with. What your boss is asking you to do is called time theft or payroll fraud. It's a crime. Usually a felony if the amounts are significant enough. If you participate even under coercion, you can be held criminally liable." Maya's hands clenched in her lap. She already knew this. She'd lived this. But hearing it laid out so bluntly made it real in a different way. If you refuse and she retaliates, fires you, demotes you, makes your work life hell, That's potentially wrongful termination or retaliation, which is illegal. But proving it can be difficult. Corporate retaliation is often subtle. They'll find other reasons, document performance issues, build a case that looks legitimate. So I'm screwed either way. Not necessarily. Patricia leaned back in her chair. Here's what I recommend. Tomorrow's meeting, you're going to say no. Clearly, unambiguously, in a way that can't be misinterpreted. Then you're going to document that refusal? How? Email yourself a summary immediately after the meeting. Date, time, what was said, your response. Print it out. Keep a copy at home. If she gives you any instructions in writing, emails, texts, anything, save them. Make backups. Keep them somewhere outside of work. Maya nodded, pulling out her phone to take notes. Second, you're going to report this to HR and to the company's ethics hotline if they have one, in writing. Not because HR will necessarily protect you, they work for the company, not for you. But because it creates a paper trail. It makes it harder for them to claim later that they didn't know. Won't that make Teresa furious? Yes, absolutely, but you need to understand something, Maya. You're already in danger. Your boss has already identified you as a potential fall guy. If you do what she asks, you take all the risk and she keeps the money and the clean record. If you refuse but don't report it, she'll find someone else to victimize and you become a potential witness she needs to discredit. Your only real protection is sunlight, making sure there's a record that you refused and reported. Maya's mouth was dry. She drank more water. What happens after I report? Hard to say. Best case scenario, the company investigates, finds evidence of ongoing fraud, and removes Teresa. You're protected from retaliation under whistleblower statutes. Worst case, they bury it, claim insufficient evidence, and start building a case to fire you for other reasons. That's the worst case? Well, the actual worst case is that you participate, get caught, and end up with a criminal record that follows you for the rest of your life. Patricia's expression was grave. I've seen it happen, usually to young people early in their careers who trusted someone in authority and didn't know they had the right to say no. Maya felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of guilt and shame she'd been carrying from a life that hadn't happened yet. She wasn't stupid for what she'd done before. She'd been young and scared and manipulated by someone who knew exactly how to exploit her. If you report and they retaliate, call me immediately, Patricia continued. We'll discuss your options for a wrongful termination suit. I can also help you file a complaint with the Department of Labor if needed. But Maya, and I'm saying this because you need to hear it, you might lose your job over this. Not because you did anything wrong, but because that's sometimes how these things work. You need to be prepared for that possibility. I understand. Do you have savings? Family you can stay with if needed? Some savings, not much. In her first timeline, she'd had even less. The trial had bankrupted her completely. And my parents, yeah. They'd let me come home. Good, that's good. Patricia closed her legal pad. One more thing. If the police get involved, if there's an investigation and they want to talk to you, call me first. Don't talk to them without representation, even if you think you have nothing to hide. People talk themselves into trouble more often than you'd think. Maya stood, her legs steadier than they'd been in Teresa's office. How much do I owe you for today? Initial consultation is free. If you need me to take action, draft letters, file complaints, represent you in court, we'll discuss fees then. But for now, you just owe me a promise to protect yourself. They shook hands again. Patricia's grip was still firm, grounding. You're doing the right thing, Patricia said. I know it doesn't feel that way, it feels terrifying. But trust me, you're saving yourself from something much worse. Maya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She walked out of the office, down the stairs, and into the cool April afternoon. The sun was lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the historic district's brick sidewalks. People walked past with shopping bags and coffee cups, oblivious to the small drama playing out in Maya's life. She pulled out her phone and updated her notes. April 12th, 4:30 p.m. Met with employment lawyer Patricia Martinez. She advised, 1. Refuse clearly and document. 2. Report to HR and ethics hotline in writing. 3. Keep copies of everything outside work. Said whistleblower protections exist but not guaranteed. Might lose job but criminal prosecution worse. Call her if retaliation occurs. Then she added, lawyer said I'm doing the right thing. Still terrified. But less alone. She walked to the subway station. descended into the familiar smell of concrete and metal and too many bodies in a confined space. The train came, packed with commuters heading home. Maya squeezed into a spot near the door, holding the rail as the train lurched into motion. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., she would walk into Teresa's office and say no. And then she would see if the universe really had given her a second chance, or if this was just a different path to the same disaster. Maya's apartment was on the 4th floor of a walk-up in a neighborhood that was gentrifying, which meant the rent was too high, but the building still had roaches. Her studio was small, a main room that served as bedroom, living room, and kitchen, plus a bathroom the size of a closet. The window looked out on an air shaft, offering a view of other people's brick walls. But it was hers. Or at least she paid for it. And after the trial in her first timeline, after the conviction and the eviction and the months of couch surfing, it felt like a palace. She dropped her bag by the door and stood in the center of the room, just breathing. The refrigerator hummed. The neighbor's bass guitar started up. It was 8 o'clock, which meant he was warming up for his nightly practice session. The radiator clanked and hissed, even though it was April, and didn't need to be on. Home. Maya kicked off her shoes and went to the kitchen area, really just a counter with a 2-burner stove and a mini fridge. She had half a rotisserie chicken in the fridge, going dry, and some wilted lettuce. She made herself a sad sandwich, poured a glass of water, and sat on her futon to eat. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Patricia Martinez. I wanted to follow up on our conversation today. Remember, document everything, refuse clearly, report in writing. You're going to be okay. Call if you need anything. Maya saved the number, added it to her contacts. She typed back, "Thank you, I will." Another buzz, this time from Teresa. "Looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. I know you'll make the right decision." The words felt like a threat disguised as encouragement. Maya stared at them until her vision blurred, then set the phone face down on the futon beside her. She ate her sandwich mechanically, barely tasting it. Her mind was racing, running through scenarios, playing out tomorrow's conversation 100 different ways. What if she said no and Teresa fired her on the spot? What if HR didn't believe her? What if... Her phone rang. The screen showed Mom. Maya almost didn't answer. She wasn't ready to talk, to pretend everything was fine, to have a normal conversation about normal things when her entire life felt like it was balanced on a knife's edge. But her mother would worry if she didn't pick up, would call back repeatedly, and Maya didn't have the energy for that. "Hey, Mom." "Maya, I wasn't expecting you to answer. I know you're usually busy in the evenings." Her mother's voice was warm, familiar, carrying the slight accent that 20 years in America hadn't quite erased. Maya closed her eyes and let herself sink into the sound of it. "I had time," she said. "How's work? You sounded stressed in your text." "It's fine, just busy." "You're eating enough?" "Nee, you always forget to eat when you're stressed." "I'm eating." Maya looked down at her half-eaten sandwich. "I had dinner." Good. A pause. Maya could hear the TV in the background, her dad watching the news, the way he did every evening. "Your father wants to know when you're coming to visit. It's been almost 2 months." "I know. I'm sorry. It's just hard to get away with work." "You work too hard. They don't pay you enough to work that hard." It was a familiar refrain, one her mother had repeated throughout Maya's 20s. In her first timeline, Maya had brushed it off, had thought her mother didn't understand the demands of the corporate world, the necessity of proving yourself. Now she realized her mother had understood perfectly. She'd just valued her daughter's well-being more than her daughter's career advancement. "Maybe you're right," Maya said quietly. "Of course I'm right. I'm your mother." Another pause. "Maya, is everything okay? You sound different." Maya's throat tightened. She wanted to tell her mother everything. About Teresa's request, about the lawyer, about the fear that kept her up at night. She wanted to ask for advice, for reassurance, for someone to tell her what to do. But she couldn't. Because how could she explain that she'd already lived through this? That she'd already made the wrong choice once? That she was terrifying of making the wrong choice again? Her mother would think she was having a breakdown. And maybe she was. "I'm okay," Maya said. "Just tired." "You should take a vacation. Come home for a week. Your father and I would love to see you." "Maybe soon?" They talked for a few more minutes, about Maya's dad's garden, about her mother's book club, about the new restaurant that had opened downtown. Normal things, safe things, the kind of conversation that felt like a lifeline even as Maya's mind kept circling back to tomorrow. I love you, Maya said when they were saying goodbye. She said it with more intensity than usual, and her mother noticed. I love you too, sweetheart. Are you sure everything's okay? Yeah, I'm sure. I'll call you this weekend. After she hung up, Maya sat in silence, listening to the bass guitar thrumming through the walls. She pulled out her laptop and opened a document, started typing. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., I will meet with Teresa Chen. She will ask me to commit payroll fraud by clocking her hours under my employee ID. I will refuse. I will say, I appreciate your trust in me, but I'm not comfortable with that arrangement. I don't think it's appropriate or legal. She typed it out several times, refining the language, making it clear and unambiguous. Then she printed it out. Her printer was old and made groaning noises, but it still worked, and put the paper in her bag. Having a script made her feel slightly less terrified. Not much, but enough. She spent the next hour researching whistleblower protections, employment law, payroll fraud statutes. She read case studies of other people who'd refused to participate in fraud, who'd reported their bosses, who'd tried to do the right thing. Some of them had won. Some had lost their jobs anyway. All of them had been through hell. But they'd survived. At 11 o'clock, Maya closed her laptop and tried to sleep. She lay on her futon, staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to the sounds of the building, pipes groaning, neighbors arguing, someone's TV playing too loud. The same sounds she'd fallen asleep to for months, both in this timeline and the last. Except last time, she hadn't known what was coming. She'd thought she was making smart career moves, being a team player, proving her worth. She'd thought she was building a future. She'd been building a prison instead. Maya rolled onto her side, pulled her thin blanket up to her chin. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she would change everything. If the universe let her. The day crawled toward 2 o'clock with agonizing slowness. Maya went through the motions of work, answering emails, attending a meeting about Q2 projections, helping Marcus with his formatting issues, while her stomach churned and her mind raced. Every time someone walked past her cubicle, she tensed. Every time her computer pinged with a new message, she jumped. At 1:45, she went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face. Her reflection in the mirror looked pale, her eyes too wide. She'd barely slept, and it showed. She dried her face with rough paper towels and gave herself a pep talk that felt as hollow as it sounded. You can do this. You've already done the hard part. You've lived through the consequences. This is just prevention. At 1:55, she walked to Teresa's office. Her legs felt like they belonged to someone else. The script she'd written was folded in her pocket, but she'd memorized it. She knew what she had to say. She knocked. Come in. Teresa's office smelled like vanilla, same as before. The VP was sitting at her desk, typing something on her laptop, her manicured nails clicking against the keys. She looked up when Maya entered and smiled that practiced smile. Maya, right on time. Close the door? Maya closed it. The latch clicked. She sat in the same uncomfortable chair as yesterday, feet not quite touching the floor properly. So, Teresa said, closing her laptop and giving Maya her full attention. Have you had a chance to think about what we discussed? I have. And, Maya took a breath. Her heart was hammering so hard she was sure Teresa could hear it. I appreciate your trust in me, and I'm flattered that you'd consider me for a special project. But I'm not comfortable with the arrangement you described. I don't think it's appropriate or legal to clock your hours under my employee ID. The silence that followed was deafening. Teresa's expression didn't change immediately. The smile stayed fixed for a few more seconds, frozen like a mask. Then it slowly faded, replaced by something harder. I see. Teresa's voice was cold now, the warmth completely gone. Can I ask what specifically concerns you? It's payroll fraud, Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. It could result in criminal charges. For both of us. That's a very dramatic interpretation. Teresa leaned back in her chair, studying Maya with new eyes. I was talking about flexible time management, corporate efficiency. There are different ways to structure these things. You asked me to clock your hours under my employee ID so it wouldn't look like you were claiming overtime, Maya said. That's not flexibility. That's fraud. Teresa's jaw tightened. You're being naive. This is how business works, Maya. Everyone cuts corners. Everyone finds creative solutions. The only difference is that some people are smart enough to understand that, and some people are too rigid to succeed. Then I guess I'm too rigid. You're making a mistake. Teresa's voice was sharp now, all pretense dropped. I was offering you an opportunity, a real future with this company, and you're throwing it away because of some misguided sense of, what, ethics? Morality? Yes, Maya said simply. Teresa stood up. She walked to the window, her back to Maya, her shoulders rigid with anger. The afternoon light caught the red soles of her shoes. You know what's going to happen now, Teresa said without turning around. You're going to find that your career here has a very low ceiling. You're going to find that opportunities somehow never quite come your way, that promotions go to other people, so that your performance reviews are always just slightly below satisfactory. Is that a threat? It's reality. Teresa turned around. Her face was composed now, back to professional. I trusted you with sensitive information, Maya. I thought you were smart enough to understand what that meant. But if you're going to be difficult, if you're going to make problems... She left the threat hanging. Maya stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she stood. I'm going to report this conversation to HR. Go ahead. Teresa's smile was cold. Tell them that your boss tried to discuss workflow optimization with you, and you accused her of criminal activity. See how that goes. I have documentation. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Teresa's face. What documentation? Emails, notes, dates, and times. Maya pulled out her phone. Showed Teresa the screenshots. Everything you've said, everything you've asked me to do. Teresa's face went pale, then red. You've been documenting our conversations. I have. And I've spoken to a lawyer. And I'm going to report this to the company ethics hotline as well as HR. You little... Teresa stopped herself, visibly struggling to regain control. When she spoke again, her voice was dangerously quiet. You have no idea what you're doing, no idea who you're messing with. I know exactly what I'm doing, Maya said. I'm protecting myself. She turned and walked to the door. Her hand was on the handle when Teresa spoke again. You're finished here. You know that, right? You'll never work in this industry again. I'll make sure of it. Maya looked back at her. Teresa stood in the middle of her office, surrounded by her motivational posters and expensive furniture, and the trappings of success built on fraud and intimidation. She looked smaller somehow, exposed. Better finished than in prison? Maya said. Then she walked out and closed the door behind her. Maya's hands were shaking so badly she could barely type. She was back at her cubicle, her body running on pure adrenaline, her mind replaying the conversation with Teresa on an endless loop. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. She'd said no. Now came the hard part. She opened her work email and started a new message to HR, to whom it may concern. I am writing to report a serious concern about a request made to me by my supervisor, Teresa Chen, VP of Operations. On April 12th, Ms. Chen asked me to meet with her privately in her office. During this meeting, she requested that I clock her work hours under my employee ID to avoid the appearance that she was claiming excessive overtime. She described this as flexible time tracking solutions and promised me a promotion within 6 months in exchange for my participation. She specifically instructed me to keep this conversation confidential and implied that my job security depended on my compliance. On April 13th, I declined this request, stating that I believed it constituted payroll fraud. Ms. Chen responded by threatening retaliation, stating that my career at this company would be limited and that opportunities would no longer come my way. She also threatened my future employment in the industry. I have documentation of these conversations, including notes with dates and times, and I am willing to provide additional details as needed. I am reporting this because I believe it constitutes fraud and because I am concerned about potential retaliation. Please let me know what steps I should take next. Sincerely, Maya Chen, Operations Coordinator. She read it over 3 times, her heart pounding. It was clear, factual, specific. She attached her notes and screenshots. Then, before she could lose her nerve, she hit send. The email disappeared from her outbox. There was no taking it back now. Maya immediately forwarded a copy to her personal email, then called the company ethics hotline. A recorded message instructed her to leave detailed information about her concern. She did, speaking carefully and clearly, repeating the same information from her email. When she hung up, her hands were still shaking. She pulled out her phone and texted Patricia Martinez. I said no. Teresa threatened retaliation. Reported to HR and ethics hotline. What now? The response came within minutes. Good. Document the threats. Save copies of your report. If anything happens, any disciplinary action, any negative performance reviews, contact me immediately. You did the right thing." Maya wanted to believe her. She wanted to feel relief or pride or vindication. Instead, she just felt nauseous and terrified and very, very alone. She forced herself to go through her normal afternoon routine. She responded to emails. She attended a meeting about a client proposal. She helped Janet with some filing. She acted like everything was normal, even though she kept expecting security to show up and escort her out of the building. At 4:30, Marcus appeared at her cubicle. "Hey, wanna grab a drink after work?" "A bunch of us are going to Murphy's." Murphy's was the bar down the street, the one with sticky floors and cheap beer and after-work crowds from all the nearby office buildings. Maya had gone a few times in her first timeline, awkward networking events where she'd nursed a beer and tried to make small talk with coworkers she barely knew. "I don't think so," she said. "I'm pretty tired. Come on, just one drink. You've seemed stressed all week." Marcus lowered his voice. "Everything okay? I heard you had a meeting with Teresa yesterday. She's not giving you a hard time, is she?" Maya looked at Marcus, his open face, his genuine concern. In her first timeline, he'd been fired 8 months from now. Budget cuts, Teresa would say. Performance issues, nothing personal. But Maya had seen the way Teresa treated people she didn't like. The way she slowly squeezed them out of the organization. "Has Teresa ever asked you to do anything?" Maya paused, choosing her words carefully. "Anything that seemed questionable?" Marcus blinked. "Questionable how?" "Never mind. Forget I asked." "No, seriously, what do you mean?" Maya hesitated. She wanted to warn him, wanted to tell him to document everything, to protect himself. But she'd already stuck her neck out. She couldn't drag other people into this, not when she didn't know how it would end. "Just be careful," she said finally. "Make sure you're covering yourself, keeping records of your work." Marcus frowned. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "No, I'm just being cautious." "Okay." He didn't look convinced. "The offer stands if you want to talk. I'm a good listener." "Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate it." He left. So, looking back over his shoulder with concern, Maya turned back to her computer and stared at her inbox, waiting for a response from HR that might not come today, or tomorrow, or ever. 3 days passed. Maya went to work, did her job, and waited for the other shoe to drop. HR hadn't responded to her email. The ethics hotline hadn't called back. Teresa avoided her completely. No emails, no meetings, no acknowledgement that she existed. It was the silence that was hardest to bear. The not knowing, the waiting. On the 4th day, Maya was called to a meeting with Linda Chen, no relation, the head of HR. Linda's office was in the corner of the 3rd floor, a small room with glass walls that offered no privacy but gave the illusion of transparency. Linda herself was in her late 40s, always perfectly dressed, with a reputation for being firm but fair, which in corporate speak meant she did what was best for the company and occasionally what was best for employees if those things aligned. "Maya, come in. Close the door." Linda gestured to a chair. She had a folder open on her desk. Maya could see her name on the tab. "Thanks for meeting with me," Maya said, even though this wasn't optional. "I wanted to discuss the report you filed. I've reviewed your allegations, and I've spoken with Miss Chen about the situation." Maya's stomach dropped. "You told her I reported her?" "I had to investigate the allegations. That involves speaking with all relevant parties." "What did she say?" Linda folded her hands on the desk. Her nails were manicured, French tips, perfect crescents. "Miss Chen states that you misunderstood her intentions. She says she was discussing workflow optimization and ways to better track project hours across departments. She denies asking you to commit fraud or threatening you in any way. She's lying. Miss Chen is a valued member of our leadership team with 12 years of service. You've been with the company for 4 months. Linda's tone was neutral, but the implication was clear. You understand how this looks. "I have documentation," Maya said. "I have emails. I have notes with dates and times. I've reviewed what you sent. The emails are vague. They mention a special project and workflow optimization, but nothing explicitly illegal. Your notes are your word against hers. So you're not going to investigate? I am investigating. That's what this meeting is. But I need you to understand that serious allegations require serious evidence. If we take action against a vice president based solely on one person's interpretation of a conversation, She trailed off, letting Maya fill in the blanks. If they took action, if they fired Teresa, or even seriously questioned her, and it turned out to be a misunderstanding, the company would face a lawsuit. Better to protect the VP than the coordinator. What happens now? Maya asked. We're going to continue monitoring the situation. If there are any other incidents, you should report them immediately. In the meantime, we're arranging for you to transfer to a different team under a different supervisor. I'm being moved. It seems like the best solution for everyone. You'll report to David Nguyen in client services. He's a good manager? Very by the book. The transfer will happen next week. Maya should have felt relieved. She was getting away from Teresa, getting a fresh start. But it felt like punishment, like she was the problem being moved out of the way. And Teresa? Miss Chen will continue in her current role, but we'll be keeping an eye on the situation. Linda's expression softened slightly. I know this isn't the outcome you were hoping for, but sometimes these things are complicated. It's not always clear-cut. It was very clear-cut, actually, but Maya didn't say that. There was no point. Can I ask, if other people have reported Teresa for similar issues, would you tell me? You know I can't discuss other personnel matters, which was basically a yes. If Maya was the first, Linda would have said so. The fact that she didn't meant there had been others. Other young employees who'd been asked to do questionable things, who'd reported it, who'd been moved or dismissed while Teresa stayed protected. Is there anything else? Linda asked. No. Thank you for your time. Maya stood on shaking legs and walked out. The glass walls of Linda's office felt like a fishbowl. Everyone in the surrounding cubicles could see her leaving, could probably tell something had happened. She kept her head up and walked back to her desk with as much dignity as she could manage. A transfer. It could be worse. She still had a job. She hadn't been fired. The company knew about Teresa now, even if they weren't doing anything about it yet. It was something, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like losing slowly instead of all at once. Maya sat down at her desk and opened her email. There was a message from David Nguyen. Looking forward to working with you. Let's grab coffee tomorrow and discuss your transition. She closed the email and put her head in her hands. David Nguyen's team occupied a different floor, the second, where the lighting was slightly better and the cubicles were configured in groups of 4 instead of rows. It felt more open, more collaborative, or maybe just more chaotic. People talked across dividers, shared snacks, decorated their desks with photos and plants and small toys. It was nothing like the silent, tense atmosphere of Teresa's domain. Maya's new desk was by a window, an actual window, with natural light and a view of the street below. It felt like a luxury after months in the interior wasteland of gray fabric walls. We're pretty casual here, David said, helping her set up her computer. He was in his mid-30s, wearing jeans and a polo shirt instead of business casual. I don't care when you get here as long as the work gets done. Most people do 9 to 5, but if you're a night owl or an early bird, that's fine too. That's different. Teresa was pretty strict about hours, huh? David's tone was carefully neutral, but his eyes were sympathetic. Yeah, I've heard. We do things differently. I figure we're all adults. Treat people like adults. They usually act like adults. It was a radical concept in corporate America. Maya's new team consisted of 4 people. Herself, a woman named Aisha who handled client communications, a guy named Tom who did data analysis, and someone named Chris, who seemed to do a little of everything. They all welcomed her warmly, invited her to lunch. He asked about her background without prying into why she'd transferred. It was almost unsettling after the paranoia of waiting for Teresa's retaliation. So, Aisha said over lunch in the break room, what's your story? You came from operations, right? Yeah, 4 months. And now you're in client services. That's quite a switch. Maya poked at her salad. I needed a change. Fair enough. Aisha was in her early 30s, black with close-cropped hair and the kind of easy confidence Maya envied. Well, you'll like it here. David's great. Actually gives credit where credit's due. Doesn't throw people under the bus when things go wrong. That's refreshing, right? My last boss... Aisha shook her head. Let's just say I understand needing a change. Tom joined them, Hoyert carrying a burrito that smelled significantly better than the break room's usual offerings. New girl, welcome to the good side of the building. Is there a bad side? 4th floor, Tom said without hesitation. Operations. That whole department is a nightmare. Everyone's stressed, turnover is insane, and the VP is supposedly a terror. Maya kept her expression neutral. I've heard rumors. It's not just rumors, Chris said, sitting down with their lunch. Chris was non-binary, mid-20s, with purple streaks in their hair and an impressive collection of enamel pins on their bag. My roommate worked for Teresa Chen for 6 months before quitting, said it was the worst job they'd ever had. Constant, impossible demands, public humiliation, that thing where someone takes credit for your work. Why does the company keep her? Maya asked. Aisha snorted. Because she makes the money, or at least she claims to make the money. She's good at playing the political game, knows who to schmooze, how to make herself look good in front of executives. Classic narcissist, Tom added. Charismatic upward, abusive downward. Maya filed this information away. Her new team, knew about Teresa. They'd heard stories. They were willing to talk about it openly, at least among themselves. That was different from the hushed whispers and careful neutrality in operations. You worked for her? Chris asked Maya. Is that why you transferred? Something like that? Say no more. Chris held up their hands. Witness protection program. We've had a couple of refugees from operations. You're in good company. The conversation moved on to other topics. Weekend plans, a new restaurant, someone's dating disaster. Maya listened and occasionally contributed, feeling herself slowly relax into this new space. It wasn't perfect. She was still at Ridgemont Consulting, still in the same building, still working for a company that had protected Teresa over her. But at least here, she could breathe. After lunch, David called her into his office, less an office and more a corner desk with low dividers, visible to the whole team. How are you settling in? He asked. Good. Everyone's been really welcoming. They're good people. David leaned back in his chair. Look, I'm going to be straight with you. I don't know exactly what happened with Teresa, and you don't have to tell me, but I know she has a reputation. I know people don't usually transfer out of operations unless something's wrong. Maya's guard went up. HR said it was just a reorganization. HR always says that. David's smile was wry. But between you and me, you're not the first person I've taken from that department, and you probably won't be the last. Teresa goes through assistants and coordinators like tissue paper, burns them out, pushes them too hard, or... He paused. Or asks them to do things they shouldn't have to do. You know about that? I know rumors. I know enough to know that if you transferred out, you probably had good reasons. And I want you to know that this team operates differently. If I ever ask you to do something that makes you uncomfortable, you tell me. If you see something that doesn't seem right, you report it. No retaliation, no politics. Clear? Clear. Good. David pulled up a project file on his computer. Now, let's talk about actual work. We've got a client presentation next week that needs some serious TLC. Maya spent the rest of the afternoon learning the client services workflow, reviewing proposals and presentations, getting up to speed on active accounts. It was interesting work, more visible than what she'd been doing in operations. She could see how her efforts contributed to actual results, actual revenue. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, she was exhausted, but in a good way. The kind of tired that came from mental engagement rather than emotional stress. She packed up her things, said goodbye to her new team, and headed for the elevator. As she waited, the doors opened to reveal Teresa stepping out. They made eye contact. For a moment, but neither of them moved. Then Teresa's expression went cold and hard. She walked past Maya without a word, her heels clicking on the tile, trailing that vanilla scent like a warning. Maya stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the doors closed, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She'd survived, she'd said no, reported it, and survived. She had a new team, a new boss, a new chance. It wasn't justice. Teresa was still there, still in power, still able to victimize the next young employee who didn't know better. But Maya had protected herself, and sometimes, in the corporate world, that was the best you could do. 3 months later, Maya was working on a client proposal when Aisha rushed over to her desk, eyes wide. "Have you heard?" Aisha whispered. "Heard what?" "There's an audit. A real one. Federal investigators are in the building." Maya's heart stopped. "What?" "Payroll audit. Someone, I don't know who, tipped off the Department of Labor about irregularities. They showed up this morning with a warrant to review all our time tracking records for the past 3 years. Maya's hands went numb. 3 years? Yeah, they're in the conference room right now, going through everything. HR is freaking out. I heard Linda Chen stress eating donuts in her office. This couldn't be happening. Not now. Not after she'd escaped, transferred, moved on. Maya had assumed her report to HR and the ethics hotline had gone nowhere, had been filed away and forgotten. She'd assumed Teresa would continue as she always had, untouchable. She'd been wrong. "Do we know what they're looking for?" Maya asked, sort of trying to keep her voice steady. "Payroll fraud, apparently. Time theft. Someone was clocking hours they didn't work, or clocking them under other people's IDs. Aisha lowered her voice even more. "I heard Teresa Chen's name mentioned." Maya stood up, her legs shaky. "I need to use the bathroom." "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine. Just need a minute." She walked to the bathroom on unsteady legs, locked herself in a stall, and tried to breathe. Federal investigators. That meant someone had taken her report seriously. That meant they'd found evidence. That meant... Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Agent Sarah Chen from the Department of Labor. We need to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation. Please call this number at your earliest convenience. Time sensitive." Dear Maya stared at the text until her vision blurred. This was real. This was happening. She called Patricia Martinez. "Maya, are you okay? You sound... Federal investigators are here at my office. They're auditing payroll records. An agent just texted me." A pause. Okay, here's what you do. Do not talk to them without me present. Call the agent back. Tell them you want your attorney present for any interview. They might push back, but stand firm. Then forward me that text and any other communications. I'll contact them and arrange a time to meet. What if they... Maya, listen to me. You reported fraud. You refused to participate. You're not in trouble. You're a witness. But you still need representation to make sure your rights are protected. Call them back. Ask for your lawyer to be present, and then wait for me to contact you. Can you do that? Yes. Good. Call me after you talk to them. Maya hung up and immediately called the number from the text. It rang twice. "Agent Chen? This is Maya Chen. You texted me?" "Miss Chen, yes. Thank you for calling back so quickly. I'm part of a team investigating payroll irregularities at Ridgemont Consulting. We'd like to ask you some questions about your time there, particularly regarding your former supervisor, Teresa Chen. I want my attorney present for any interview." A pause. "That's your right, of course, though I should mention that you're not a suspect. We believe you may have witnessed. I understand, but I still want my attorney present." Another pause, longer this time. "All right, have your attorney contact me to arrange a meeting. The sooner the better. We're operating on a tight timeline. She'll call you today. One more thing, Miss Chen. Have you been contacted by anyone from Ridgemont's legal team or by Miss Teresa Chen directly regarding this investigation? No. If you are, don't speak with them without your attorney and document any contact attempts. I will." She hung up and immediately texted Patricia. "Just spoke to Agent Chen. Said I want you present. She wants to meet ASAP. Call her to arrange." Then she splashed cold water on her face, dried it with paper towels, and stared at her reflection. She looked older than she had 3 months ago. The stress had carved new lines around her eyes, but she also looked stronger, less afraid. She'd done this. She'd reported the fraud, and someone had listened. Someone had investigated. And now Teresa was finally going to face consequences. Maya walked back to her desk. The office was buzzing with energy. People clustered in groups, whispering, speculating. She could see investigators through the glass walls of the conference room, men and women in suits, reviewing documents, taking photos with official-looking cameras. David appeared at her desk. "Maya, can we talk? My office?" Her stomach dropped. "Sure." But when they got to his corner desk, David's expression wasn't angry or accusatory. It was concerned. "I just got off the phone with HR," he said quietly. "They told me you might be contacted by investigators. Something about a report you filed a few months ago. I reported Teresa for payroll fraud. She asked me to clock her hours under my ID." David nodded slowly. "I figured it was something like that." "Oh, are you okay? This has to be stressful." "I'm okay. I have a lawyer. I'm cooperating with the investigation." "Good. That's good." David ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I want you to know. Whatever you need, time off for meetings, space to deal with this, you have it. No questions asked. What you did, reporting fraud, that takes guts. Most people wouldn't." I didn't feel brave. I felt terrified. Bravery is being terrified and doing it anyway. David smiled slightly. You did the right thing, and I'll make sure you're protected through this process, okay? Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is how it should work. People who report problems shouldn't be punished. They should be protected. He paused. Between you and me? I'm glad someone finally got Teresa. No, she's been a problem for years. Did you ever report her? No, and I regret that. David's expression was pained. I knew she was difficult. I knew people quit because of her, but I told myself it wasn't my department, not my problem. I should have said something. You're braver than I was. That afternoon, Maya met with Patricia and Agent Chen at Patricia's office. The agent was younger than Maya had expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She had a colleague with her, a man who introduced himself as Agent Rodriguez. Thank you for meeting with us, Agent Chen said, pulling out a recorder. Do you consent to this interview being recorded? Maya looked at Patricia, who nodded. Yes. Let's start from the beginning. When did you start working at Ridgemont Consulting? Maya walked them through everything. Her hiring in December, her first months in operations, Teresa's initial approach, the request to commit fraud, her refusal, the threats, the report to HR. Patricia occasionally interjected to clarify a point or to protect Maya from overly leading questions, but mostly she stayed quiet, letting Maya tell her story. The agents took meticulous notes. Agent Rodriguez pulled up documents on his laptop showing Maya time-tracking records, payroll reports, email chains. Do you recognize this email? He asked, turning the screen toward her. It was from Teresa to someone in payroll, dated 2 weeks after Maya had refused. The email discussed adjusting time records for project tracking purposes and included a list of employee IDs, none of them Maya's. She found someone else, Maya said quietly. Several someone else's, Agent Chen corrected. We've identified at least 4 other employees over the past 3 years who clocked hours for Miss Chen. All young, early in their careers, all told they were participating in flexible time tracking, or project management efficiency. Most of them no longer work at Ridgemont. Where are they now? We're tracking them down to interview. But you're the only one who reported it while still employed. The others only came forward after they'd already left, and in one case, after being fired. Maya thought about that. All those people manipulated and victimized and then discarded when they became inconvenient. All those careers damaged or derailed. All because one person had figured out how to game the system and hadn't cared about the collateral damage. What happens now? Maya asked. We complete our investigation, interview other witnesses, review the financial records. Then we refer the case to the U.S. Attorney's Office for potential criminal prosecution. Agent Chen's expression was serious. I won't lie to you. These cases are complicated. They take time, and there's always a chance the prosecutor decides not to file charges. But you think they will? Based on what we've found so far? Yes, Miss Chen's fraud appears to be systematic and long-running. She stole approximately $180,000 in unearned wages over 3 years. That's a felony. $180,000. Maya tried to wrap her mind around that number. That was what Teresa had thought was worth destroying people's lives for. Well, not millions, not even $1 million. Just enough to fund her lifestyle, her vacations, her designer shoes. Will I have to testify? Maya asked. Probably if it goes to trial, but that's a ways off yet. Agent Chen closed her laptop. For now, we just need you to stay available, keep documenting anything unusual at work, and let us know if anyone tries to intimidate you or interfere with your cooperation. After the agents left, Patricia walked Maya out to her car. How do you feel? Patricia asked. I don't know. Relieved? Scared? I can't believe it's actually happening. Believe it. You made this happen. Patricia squeezed her shoulder. The hard part's over. You said no, you reported, and you cooperated with the investigation. Whatever happens next, you're on the right side of this. Maya drove home in a daze. The city lights blurring past her windows. She parked in her usual spot outside her building and sat in the car for a long moment, just breathing. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. In her first life, she'd said yes to Teresa, and it had destroyed her. In this life, she'd said no, and now Teresa was being investigated for felony fraud. The universe had given her a second chance, and she'd used it. The arrest happened on a Tuesday morning in July, 3 months after the investigators had left. Maya was at her desk working on a quarterly report when the whispers started. People congregating in hallways, phones buzzing with text messages, the energy in the office shifting from routine to electric. Aisha appeared at her desk, phone in hand. They arrested her? Maya's fingers froze on her keyboard. What? Teresa? The federal agents just walked her out in handcuffs. Someone got video? It's already on Twitter. Aisha held up her phone, showing a shaky video of Teresa in the lobby, her hands cuffed behind her back, 2 agents flanking her. Even in the grainy footage, Maya could see the expression on Teresa's face. Shock, fury, humiliation. The vanilla air freshener couldn't save her now. Jesus, Maya whispered. There's more. They arrested someone in Payroll too. Jennifer Huang. Apparently she was helping Teresa manipulate the time records. They're both being charged with wire fraud, payroll fraud, and conspiracy. Maya's phone rang. Patricia Martinez. Have you heard? Patricia asked without preamble. I just saw the video. The U.S. attorney filed charges this morning. Press conference is at noon. They're treating this as a significant white-collar crime case. Apparently Teresa's fraud was part of a larger pattern at the company. They found evidence of other schemes too, stuff beyond the time theft. What happens to her now? Arraignment. Probably later today. She'll post bail unless the prosecutor argues she's a flight risk. Then it's the usual process. Discovery, motions, maybe a trial. Though, with the evidence they have, I'd guess she'll take a plea deal. How long would she get? Hard to say. Federal sentencing guidelines for fraud are complicated. But with the amount involved and the systematic nature of the scheme, 5 to 10 years, probably. Maybe more if she doesn't cooperate. 5 to 10 years. In Maya's first life, that's what she'd been facing. That's what she'd narrowly avoided by taking a plea deal that still labeled her a felon, still destroyed her career, still followed her everywhere. Now it was Teresa's turn. Are you okay? Patricia asked. This is a big moment. I think so. It's surreal. I bet. Listen, there's going to be media attention. The company's going to be in the news. Reporters might try to contact you. Don't talk to them without calling me first, okay? Your story is compelling, but you need to be strategic about if and when you tell it. Okay? And Maya, you should be proud. You did this. You stopped her. After they hung up, Maya sat at her desk and watched the office swirl around her. People were shocked, excited, gleeful. Teresa had been feared, but she hadn't been liked. Her arrest was cathartic for everyone who'd ever felt her wrath, and who'd ever been humiliated in a meeting or pushed to the breaking point. David called an impromptu team meeting. They gathered around his desk, a circle of concerned faces. I know everyone's heard the news, David said. I want to address it head on. Yes, Teresa Chen was arrested this morning on federal fraud charges. Yes, this is related to the payroll audit from earlier this year. The company is cooperating fully with the investigation, and we've been assured that no one else on our team is implicated. Was it really $180,000? Tom asked. I can't comment on the specifics, but I can tell you that what she did was serious, systematic, and completely unacceptable. She violated the trust of her employees and the company. David's expression was grave. I also want to say, if anyone ever asks you to do something that feels wrong, that seems illegal or unethical, you have a duty to report it, not just to protect yourself, but to protect others who might be victimized. His eyes landed on Maya for just a moment. She nodded slightly. That afternoon, Ridgemont's CEO sent an all-company email. The tone was careful, full of corporate speak about alleged misconduct and ongoing investigation and commitment to ethical practices. Reading between the lines, it was clear. The company was throwing Teresa under the bus to protect itself. They'd cooperate with investigators, implement new oversight procedures, maybe fire a few people in HR who should have caught this sooner. Business as usual, in other words, just with a new villain. Maya left work early, claiming a headache that wasn't entirely fabricated. She drove to her apartment, climbed the 4 flights of stairs, and he collapsed on her futon. The neighbor's bass guitar was silent for once. Everything was silent. She pulled out her phone and opened Twitter. The story was trending locally. VP of Operations at Ridgemont Consulting arrested for $180K payroll fraud. She scrolled through the comments. People she'd never met, weighing in on a situation they didn't understand. Some called for harsh punishment. Others made jokes about white-collar crime being a slap on the wrist. A few even defended Teresa, suggesting she was being scapegoated. None of them knew about the employees she'd manipulated. None of them knew about Maya, sitting in a stairwell, documenting everything, preparing to refuse. None of them knew how close Maya had come to being the one in handcuffs. But Maya knew, and that was enough. As Patricia had predicted, Teresa took a plea deal. And it happened in September, 6 months after her arrest, 3 days before the trial was scheduled to start. Maya got the call from Patricia while she was at work. She pled guilty, Patricia said, to 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. The prosecution dropped the other charges in exchange for her cooperation. What does that mean for sentencing? She'll get somewhere between 3 and 7 years, depending on what the judge decides. Plus restitution, she'll have to pay back everything she stole with interest. And there's a civil suit coming from the company. She's going to be paying this off for the rest of her life. 3 to 7 years. Not as long as Maya had feared she'd face, but longer than Teresa had probably expected when she first asked Maya to commit fraud. Long enough to lose everything, her job, her reputation, probably her marriage. Long enough to understand what she'd done. Will I still have to testify? Maya asked. No. Since she pled, there won't be a trial. You might be asked to provide a victim impact statement at sentencing, but that's optional. You've done your part. Maya hung up and stared at her computer screen without seeing it. It was over. Really over. Teresa had admitted guilt, would go to prison, would face consequences. Justice, such as it was. The sentencing hearing was in November. Maya decided to attend, sitting in the back of the courtroom with Patricia beside her. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected, less dramatic. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, uncomfortable benches. A handful of people scattered throughout. Other victims, maybe, or reporters, or just curious onlookers. Teresa was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She'd been denied bail after violating the conditions by attempting to contact one of the other victims. She looked smaller than Maya remembered, diminished. The Louboutins were long gone. The prosecutor outlined the case. Systematic fraud over 3 years, 4 victims, $180,000 stolen, abuse of authority, betrayal of trust. He recommended 7 years. Teresa's lawyer argued for leniency, no prior criminal record, cooperation with the investigation, remorse, a family that depended on her. He recommended 3 years with credit for time served. Then the victim spoke. The first was a young man named Daniel, who'd worked for Teresa 2 years ago. He described being manipulated into clocking her hours. Being promised promotions that never came, being fired when he questioned the arrangement. He'd been unemployed for 6 months before finding a new job that paid significantly less. He still struggled with trust issues, with anxiety, with the feeling that he'd been stupid for believing someone in authority. The second victim was a woman named Lisa, who'd been let go after refusing to participate in Teresa's scheme. She'd been blacklisted in the industry, had struggled to find work, had eventually moved to a different city to start over. She'd lost her apartment, her savings, her sense of security. The third victim had submitted a written statement, read by the prosecutor. They'd participated in the fraud for 8 months before being fired, and when they'd applied for unemployment, the company had contested it, claiming they'd been terminated for cause. They'd ended up with legal bills they couldn't afford and a gap in their employment history that raised questions in every interview. Maya listened to their stories and saw herself, or rather, the version of herself from the first timeline. The one who'd said yes, the one who'd been convicted and destroyed. There, but for the grace of a second chance go high. When it was her turn, Maya stood and walked to the podium. Her hands were shaking. She'd written out a statement, but now, looking at Teresa sitting at the defense table, she set the paper aside. I was 26 years old when Teresa Chen asked me to commit fraud, Maya said. I was 4 months into my first real job out of college. I was living paycheck to paycheck, trying to prove myself, terrified of being fired. I wanted to believe that someone in authority had my best interests at heart. Teresa wouldn't look at her. She stared at the table, her jaw clenched. She made it sound like a favor, like I was helping her solve a business problem. She promised me a promotion, a future, a place in the company. She made me feel special, chosen, trusted with something important, and she made it clear that refusing would end my career. Maya's voice was steady now. She'd practiced this, but it was more than that. This was the truth, pure and simple. I said no. I reported her to HR. I cooperated with the investigation, and because I did, I kept my job, my reputation, my future. but I almost didn't. I almost said yes. I came very close to destroying my life because I didn't know I had the right to refuse. She looked at Teresa now, willing her to make eye contact. Teresa's eyes flicked up for just a second, long enough for Maya to see something there. Not remorse exactly, but awareness. Recognition. The difference between me and the other victims isn't that I was smarter or stronger, Maya continued. It's that I got lucky. I had resources they didn't. I found a lawyer who helped me. I had parents who could support me if I lost my job. Not everyone has that. She paused, gathering herself. I don't know what the right punishment is. I'm not a judge, but I know that what Teresa did wasn't just about stealing money. It was about exploiting people who trusted her, who were vulnerable, who didn't know they could say no. She created a system where saying no felt impossible. And that's what makes this so damaging. Not just the fraud, but the betrayal of everyone who worked for her, who believed in her, who thought she cared about their careers. Maya stepped back from the podium. The courtroom was silent. She returned to her seat, her legs shaking so badly she almost missed the bench. Patricia squeezed her hand. Well done. The judge deliberated for what felt like hours, but was probably only 15 minutes. Then she delivered the sentence. 5 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised release, full restitution of $180,000 plus interest and penalties, and a permanent ban from holding fiduciary positions. Not as harsh as it could have been. Not as lenient as Teresa had hoped. Justice, compromised by practicality, time constraints, and the grinding machinery of the legal system, but justice nonetheless. 5 years later. Maya stood in the conference room on the 8th floor of her new company's headquarters, looking out over the city. It was a clear day, the kind where you could see for miles, where the buildings looked sharp against the blue sky. She'd been promoted 6 months ago. Director of operations, her own team, her own budget, real authority. It had been earned through hard work, strategic thinking, and a reputation for integrity that she'd built carefully over 5 years. 5 years since Teresa's arrest, 3 years since her release from federal prison. A lifetime ago in some ways. Ready for the presentation? Aisha asked, coming up beside her. Aisha had left Ridgemont 2 years ago and joined Maya here, moving up to senior manager. It was strange and wonderful, having someone who understood where she'd come from. Oh, what she'd survived. Ready as I'll ever be? They were presenting to the board about a new oversight system for time tracking and payroll. Ironically, Maya's specialty now. She'd become something of an expert on fraud prevention, on creating systems that protected both the company and its employees. She'd even been asked to speak at conferences, to write articles, to consult for other organizations. Her experience with Teresa had become a credential, in its own dark way. The board members filed in, executives in expensive suits, carrying tablets and coffee, settling into leather chairs around the long table. Maya pulled up her presentation and took a breath. Good morning. Today, I want to talk about the cost of fraud. Not just the financial cost, but the human cost. The employees who are exploited, manipulated, or coerced into participating in schemes that destroy their careers. The presentation went well. The board asked smart questions, showed genuine interest in her proposals. They approved her recommended changes. Stronger oversight, mandatory reporting channels, anonymous hotlines, regular audits. Things that might have saved her in another life. After the meeting, Maya returned to her office, a real office with walls and a door and a window that looked out over the city. She had photos on her desk now, her parents, her girlfriend whom she'd met 2 years ago at a work conference, her dog, a rescue, scraggly and loyal. She had plants that she managed to keep alive. She had the kind of life she dreamed about at 26. Her phone buzzed, an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line was, "Thank you." Maya almost deleted it. Could be spam, could be phishing, but something made her open it. Miss Chen, you don't know me, but I worked at Ridgemont Consulting 5 years ago, under Teresa Chen. I was one of the people she manipulated into participating in her fraud. I lost my job, struggled to find work, and spent years wondering if I'd ever recover. I just wanted to let you know that because you reported her, because you said no and made it possible for the rest of us to come forward, I was able to rebuild my career. I have a good job now. I'm okay, and I wanted to thank you for having the courage to do what I didn't. I hope you're doing well. Sincerely, Daniel M. Maya stared at the email until her vision blurred. Daniel. The young man from the sentencing hearing, the first victim to speak, he was okay. He'd rebuilt. They'd all survived. She typed a reply. Daniel, thank you for reaching out. I'm glad you're doing well. What happened to us, what Teresa did, wasn't our fault. We were young and trusting and trying to do our jobs. She's the one who made the choice to exploit that. I hope you've been able to forgive yourself, the way I've had to forgive my younger self for almost making a different choice. Take care, Maya. She hit send and closed her laptop. Through her office window, she could see the sun starting to set, painting the city in shades of orange and pink. 5 years. It felt like forever and no time at all. Her phone buzzed again. This time a text from her girlfriend. Dinner tonight? I'm thinking Thai. Maya smiled and typed back, Perfect. See you at 7. She packed up her things, said goodnight to her team, and rode the elevator down to the lobby. The evening air was cool, promising rain later. She walked to the subway station, descended the stairs, and waited for her train among the crowd of commuters heading home. Just another person in the city, living their life, carrying their history. The train arrived. Maya stepped on, found a seat, and pulled out her phone to check her personal email. Mixed in with the usual spam and newsletters was a message from her dad. Proud of you, kiddo. Call your mother. She wants to hear about the presentation. Maya smiled and made a mental note to call that evening. Her parents had never known how close she'd come to disaster, how close she'd been to saying yes to Teresa. They'd been worried during the investigation, confused about why she'd transferred departments, but she'd never told them the full story. And maybe someday she would. Maybe she'd sit them down and explain about the second chance the universe had given her, about waking up 5 years in the past with the weight of a future that hadn't happened yet pressing on her chest, about choosing differently, choosing better, choosing herself, or maybe she'd keep it to herself, this strange gift, this impossible do-over, a secret carried like a talisman, a reminder that sometimes, against all logic and reason, you got the chance to rewrite your story. And when you did, when the universe offered you that impossible second chance, you took it. You said no to the people who wanted to use you. You documented everything. You called a lawyer. You reported the fraud. You protected yourself, even when it felt terrifying, even when you thought you'd lose everything. Because the alternative, the life where you said yes, where you participated, where you ended up in handcuffs while your boss claimed ignorance, that was worse. So much worse. The train emerged from underground, sunlight streaming through the windows. Maya closed her eyes and felt the warmth on her face. Somewhere in the city, Teresa was still paying restitution, still on supervised release, still marked by her conviction. Somewhere, the other victims were rebuilding, healing, learning to trust again. And here, Maya was whole, employed, free, living the life she'd almost thrown away for a promise of promotion and the fear of disappointing someone who'd never deserved her loyalty. The weight of hours had been lifted, and what remained was simply time, clean, unmarked, full of possibility. Maya opened her eyes as her stop approached. She stood, shouldered her bag, and stepped onto the platform. The evening stretched ahead of her, dinner with someone who loved her, a phone call with her parents, maybe a walk with her dog before bed. Small moments, simple pleasures, the building blocks of a life reclaimed.